investments at List New York. So that means that I'm on the lending team, but I also support the programs team, which runs the New York Land Opportunity Program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what LISC does and also talk about NILOP. Let me share screen. There we go. Okay. I think you're seeing the wrong screen. Let's see if I can get it to go over here. Let's see. Let me stop. Share. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm from List New York. LISC is a national organization. Some of you may be very familiar with us, and some of you may not be familiar with us. We've been around since 1979. We're focused in 38 markets across the country. New York is our flagship office. This is where we originated. We are a nonprofit and also a community development finance institution. So the type of finance or lending that we do is rooted in community development. Everything that we invest in has to have a community purpose, like affordable housing, childcare centers, community centers, grocery stores, a number of different types of investments that are all focused in supporting communities and lifting people up. So what do? We deploy capital, strategy, and technical assistance where there are where there are needs, where communities are low to moderate income. We believe that the time has come to forge a future for New York City that eradicates the racial wealth gap, protects affordable housing, and also builds pathways for meaningful economic opportunity. So some of the ways that we do that are through affordable housing, which is one of our cornerstones. We provide direct financing and technical assistance, as I mentioned. So what that looks like is we support partners. So community development organizations, supportive housing organizations, or mission-driven affordable housing developers. That can also be landowners like faith-based organizations, and we'll talk a little bit about our specific program focused on that. And then supporting people, we provide opportunities to persons of color to access jobs and build businesses, and expand affordable housing. And we do that through training programs that foster diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the New York Land Opportunity Program is a program that we launched in 2016. We are currently in our third round. And what we do is solicit for faith-based organizations, FDOs, or mission-driven organizations that are landowners that are looking to redevelop their sites. We select applicants from our solicitation that may be a good fit to move forward with receiving some technical assistance. That technical assistance looks like selecting a developer, finding an architect, and also an attorney for the initial stages of the redevelopment or the development process. And we pay for those things. It's a program where we pay for the architect to do an initial design review. We pay for an attorney to sort of help provide the general framework of what the relationship may look like between a faith-based organization that's a landowner and a developer that has the technical expertise and relationships with lenders and also the city of New York or the state of New York to redevelop the property. Our current cohort, which just closed last month, we selected 6 applicants, and we also expanded the program to be statewide. So some of those applicants are from Rochester, Buffalo, but we also have a number of applicants that are here in New York City. We are having a statewide NILOP convening in Albany in September. It's on the 29th. I'd be happy to share details about that convening after the call. It is free. It's completely paid for. It's at the the Renaissance Hotel in Albany, and it's a day-long conference to talk about developing property, coming together, finding best resources, talking about best practices. And I also wanted to share that a couple of months ago, LISC and Enterprise, which is another CDFI working in New York, were partnered with Bricks and Mortals, which is a nonprofit consultant supporting faith-based organizations that are working on development. We were involved in a meeting similar to this, where we were specifically talking about best practices. And I do want to share a couple of the things that came out of that meeting, including get started early, build your team, make sure you have a very tight team. And so you're soliciting, sort of references and resumes to understand what experience your team has. One of the reasons that LISC launched NILOP was we saw a lot of faith-based organizations, which are very rich in land ownership, but may need additional resources for the continuation or the ability to thrive financially. They were really meaning they were falling on tough times. Those landowners were working with developers, but not sorting out the details of the management of the development. And in some cases, we're losing their land, losing access to their land, or losing access to value over time. And we found a need to, sort of support those landowners in making sure that they weren't getting cut out of the value of their property. So just to go over the eligibility requirements quickly, to participate in NILOP, an organization must be a nonprofit corporation or a church that meets a 501c3 status. The entity has to have long-term ownership of the property. The properties has to be really underutilized or suitable for redevelopment for a housing purpose. The organization has to have a history of providing housing or other services related to the community. And the entity has to have organizational capacity with the assistance of a developer partner that we would help vet and connect you to bring the project to completion. LISC is a lender, as I mentioned, and we are a CDFI. We do have initial conversations about finance. We'll help put together the development budget so you can have a better understanding of what can be built on the site, what kind of finance needs are needed for the project. But we don't necessarily have to be the finance institution that the developer and faith-based organization work with. But I will take a little time to talk to you about what we do as a lender. So I mentioned that we're a community development finance institution. So that means that everything that we do is rooted in community development. We provide pre-development. So before the project actually breaks ground, we'll provide financing for that period. We'll provide acquisition financing. If it's acquiring a new property, we do provide construction financing, mini permanent, so not a 30-year loan, but typically up to a 10 or 15-year loan. We provide bridge financing. If there are sources that are expected to come in, but they're coming in down the road, we'll put in a bridge loan. And we also provide lines of credit in certain circumstances, which could help with pre-development across multiple projects. And again, the type of projects we invest in: community facilities, mixed use, so housing with maybe a daycare on the bottom or a church on the bottom, commercial or industrial, economic development, charter schools, and of course, affordable housing. We also do some small business lending, but I think that's a little bit more specific or particular, and I'll sort of just leave that there. And if you have questions, we can chat about it during the Q&A. This may appear very small to you, but just to give you a general overview of our limits, we do typically finance smaller projects. So our lending cap on a construction project is really up to 10 million. whereas maybe 150 unit building is going to cost upwards of 30, maybe more million, right? And so those aren't really projects that LIST can participate in. We typically sort of focus on the smaller projects that it could be typically hard to finance as well. We can bring other lenders to the table so that we can have a higher cap, but that cap might be 15 million, maybe 20 million. So we sort of have a sweet spot with smaller projects. We have fixed rates, which are great in an ever-changing rate environment. We have very clear fees for our loans. We have an origination fee of 1.5% of the loan amount. We have legal fees that are sized by the project. We do require collateral for our loans over 500,000. So if the property is owned outright, that can serve as collateral for the loan. If that isn't available, there are other conversations that we can have. We're very flexible. We're trying to make projects work. You could think of us as sort of a problem solver. These are some of the other loan products: permanent, bridge, and the line of credit that I mentioned. Similar terms, and I can also make sure that this is shared, so you have a copy of this if you are interested in learning more. LISC has a number of partnerships that we maintain to get our projects done.
Washington.
Oh, okay. So we work at the New York City Acquisition Loan Fund, which is in partnership with HPD and HDC. So we're one of 4 originators that can help acquire a project. We also do a lot of business with the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development. We are a New York City Employee Retirement System partner. So although we don't provide 30-year financing, we can go to the pension fund and they do provide the financing. So that helps us get to finance an affordable housing project with a 30-year permanent loan. We have a couple of affiliates that we do business with, including our National Equity Fund for low-income housing tax credits, and then the New Market Support Corporation for new market tax credits, which may be something that gets wrapped into a project depending on the type of project. As I mentioned, I'm Christine O'Connell, and my partner, Monica Dean, is the Director of Housing. She couldn't make it onto the call today, but she runs the NILOP program. So if you're interested in learning more about the convening that's happening in September in Albany, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Christine. So we're going to save Q&A and discussion for the very end, just to make sure we get through all the material for everybody. So next, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth Johnson and Ben Polewski from HPD. They will be giving an overview of their faith-based partnership program.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Vicki. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We're really excited to talk to you. And thank you very much to Borough President Richards and his staff for pulling this event together and also adapting on the fly. I'm joined by my colleague, Ben Polewski, to talk about faith-based organizations. My colleague, Kevin Paris, who is our Director of Queens and Staten Island Planning, is also in the crowd listening in to hear your thoughts. But we really want to talk to you a bit today about specifically what HPD does. I'm going to share my screen. Give me a moment. Okay, let's see. Okay. That's great. Okay, great. So, as part of the larger conversation around the role that faith-based organizations can play in the addressing the housing affordability crisis, we really want to speak with you today about what it means to work with HPD, the role that we play, and give you a bit of an overview of the development process. I know a lot of folks are still very early in the stages of thinking about whether this is right for them in their house of worship. So we wanted to give you bit of a step back and let you know what you can expect through the development process and what it means to work with us. So I'm just going to start today with an overview of how we work in partnership with faith-based institutions. So HPD, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, is the city's affordable housing agency. Our mission is to promote the quality and affordability in the city's housing and the diversity and strength in its neighborhoods. We do this in three main ways. The first is maintaining building and resident safety and health. I'm sure, as some of you know, HPD is responsible for ensuring the physical safety and quality of our housing to ensure the well-being and health of its residents. Our code enforcement team is very active in going out and inspecting properties, taking action when they find something that is affecting resident well-being, and educating property owners on what it means to maintain quality housing. We also offer loans to property owners, low-cost loans to property owners who are interested in upgrading their homes or upgrading their buildings or making repairs. And in exchange for that, they make a promise to us of keeping rents affordable. Second, we create opportunities for New Yorkers through housing affordability. That's really what we're here to talk to you about today. We offer low interest loans. The main we do is we offer low interest loans for development teams and organizations who want to build affordable housing. But we also help New Yorkers find homes that they can afford. We run our housing lottery on New York City Housing Connect that matches residents with available affordable home ownership opportunities. We offer down payment assistance for prospective homeowners. We offer rental assistance for tenants to help them be able to pay for an apartment. And then finally, we engage New Yorkers to build this and sustain the neighborhood's strength and diversity. This is really about community planning, making sure that communities are engaged in the planning process so they have the opportunity to learn about and provide input on the work that HPD is doing in their community to make sure that our projects meet your neighborhood's needs. We also provide outreach and education to both tenants and homeowners. We educate tenants about their rights and about various resources available to them. We educate homeowners and property owners about what it means to maintain a good quality home and what resources are available to help them through that. I want to emphasize that all of our work around engaging New Yorkers is done in partnership with community-based organizations. We know that these local partners are the ones who really know what their community is best in those needs. So we really rely on that local knowledge. Our work is rooted in and guided by the Adams administration's housing plan, housing our neighbors. We call this plan the blueprint because it's our guide for addressing housing and homelessness in New York City. It's a unique plan. It's the first citywide plan that considers housing, homelessness, affordable housing, public housing, all these different facets as part of the same larger housing affordability crisis that we need to be working holistically to address rather than thinking about them as separate problems. The plan is organized around 5 key pillars, which you can see listed here. You'll see pillars 2 through 3 really align directly with the 3 pieces of HPD's mission statement, and it's where we're really focusing our work. We're addressing homelessness and housing instability. We're creating and preserving affordable housing, and we're doing all of that to improve the health and safety of New Yorkers. So I just want to step back and root us a bit in the problem that we're trying to solve here today. New York's housing affordability crisis, as I'm sure you're all aware, is really complex. It's multifaceted. We're trying to address a lot of problems at once that all add up to housing that is unaffordable and therefore people who can't stay in their homes. Housing costs are too high for most New Yorkers. More than half of New Yorkers pay more than 30% of their income to rent and housing costs. which means they have less for things like food, education, healthcare. And then we also have 1/3 of New Yorkers are paying more than half of their income to rent and housing costs. This is compounded by the fact that we are in a supply crunch. There are not enough affordable homes in New York. In recent decades, we've seen that population growth has really outpaced housing, and we have not kept up construction to meet that need. And then this is compounded by, kind of what we're seeing in the economy today. We've got interest rates going up, inflation, insurance premiums going up. These are all things that impact the cost of maintaining a quality home. And it's really expensive and getting more expensive, which puts pressure on small homeowners and small property owners to try to maintain quality housing. And because we have a housing supply problem, because housing is expensive, we're really limiting where people can live. We're limiting both their housing choice and their neighborhood choice, which reinforces segregation in New York City and the negative consequences that come with segregation. Things like poverty, disparities in health and education. And all of these factors add up to a housing crisis that's leading to what we're seeing today: widespread homelessness, poor quality housing, a high burden, rental cost burden, and overcrowding as tenants kind of double up, triple up to help save money and live with friends or family when they're pushed out of their own homes. But we're coming in today because Houses of Worship present a really special opportunity to address this housing affordability crisis. By developing housing on the land that you own, you have the opportunity to both address the crisis and bring benefits to both your faith organization and your neighborhood. An affordable housing project creates the opportunity for growth and financial security for your institution. It also reduces the housing cost for your neighbors, low and moderate income neighbors in your community. And finally, affordable housing is tied to increases housing stability, which is tied to a lot of positive outcomes, including better health, improved child well-being, stronger economic mobility. And so really all of these things together, you have the opportunity to bring a project forward that can address not just the housing crisis, but all of the downstream effects of it. So should you and your congregation decide that affordable housing is the right project for you and the land that you control, you'd probably work closely with a team like LISC and some other partners, as well as HPD, to bring that project to life. A little bit about HPD's role in the affordable housing development process. We're not involved all the way through, but we do 3 kind of major things. We offer low-cost financing to development teams who want to build affordable housing on the land that they own. We also conduct land use activities to help support your development plan. So sometimes you'll have a property that you want to develop, but you're not going to be able to build something that's big enough to support the cost of that. We'll work with you on what's called a rezoning, which will change the use of your land, which may allow you to build a larger development to allow for a bigger building that works out more, that pencils out financially. We also support reviewing property analyses and your project plans and making sure that the construction is safe and addresses high quality and is safe both from a tenant perspective and a labor perspective. And then finally, once your project's complete, HPD matches low-income residents with the affordable housing opportunities in your project through our New York City Housing Connect website. So what do we finance? We finance lots of different things. We finance both rental housing and homeownership opportunities. Our rental housing serves a range of households, ranging from extremely low income households to moderate income households. We also offer programs that support vulnerable residents such as low-income seniors, and supportive housing for folks who might need additional support or social services. And all of our rental housing requires that 15% or more of the apartments in a project are set aside for households referred from the shelter system. Our homeownership housing is a little different. It generally serves moderate income households, but we build all types of homeownership. We build condos, co-ops, single family homes, and these homes often can be, they're for moderate income homeowners, and they often are, we can offer assistance around down payments. So lots of different projects that we can offer here. But I want to give you a couple examples of what faith-based projects that we've worked on look like. Hopefully this serves as a bit of inspiration for you all as you think through what your plans might be, what your vision is for your property. So the first one is a project we call named Ebenezer Plaza. It's a partnership. It was built in partnership between the Church of God at East Flatbush, Brisa Builders, Proceeded Development, and Evergreen City. It's in Brownsville, Brooklyn. This is a very large project. It's multi-phase, multi-use. We are wrapping up the first phase now. There will be subsequent phases. But the first phase brought 315 affordable homes for extremely low and very low income residents in Brownsville. The project also includes a new worship space for the church, as well as some commercial space to bring new retail to the community. And the church played a strong role in the development process, and they worked really closely with Brisa Builders and Evergreen City, as well as Proceeded Development. Brisa and Evergreen are certified minority and women-owned business enterprises. Proceed as a long-term partner of HPD that works on a lot of affordable housing projects. The second example I wanted to bring to you is Bronx Pro 1017 Home Street. This was a project that was done in partnership with Home Street Presbyterian Church in the Foxhurst section of the Bronx. Unlike the previous project, Home Street, the church decided that they did not want to be part of the development process. So instead they sold the land to the development partners and chose to take the proceeds from that sale to support their church. So this was a partnership between Bronx Pro and Dream Yard, and it brought 63 affordable apartments for seniors to the Bronx. And it also includes 3,000 square feet of space that one of the partners, Dream Yard, is using for its Bronx Start program, which is a program that's focused on economic opportunity, social justice, and community building for residents in the Bronx. So each of these projects has really, brought affordable housing to the community, as well as other services and resources that were in line with the churches and each of the church's missions. So now I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what the affordable housing process looks like, walk you through it, and talk to you about both the role that HPD plays and the other type of partners you're going to be working with if you choose to take on an affordable housing project. So the first phase of a development process is what we call the early pre-development phase. And this part of the process is really critical to setting up your project for success. It's where you develop your vision for your project. It's where you decide what type of housing your project is suitable for, and it's where you build your team. This phase typically doesn't involve HPD. Instead, you'll work really closely with what's called an owner's representative, who can guide you through the process. The owner's representative is a real estate advisor who helps you manage your project. They help you with making important decisions, everything from what's the vision to who's the partner to what's the type of housing we want to provide. And they're with you from start to finish. It's really critical that you have an owner's representative that you trust. Typically, we advise you pick someone who doesn't have any previous connection to your church, or your house of worship, or to your developer that you're working with. We want someone who can give you unbiased advice and guidance. If you're thinking about this and you want to think about an owner's representative, you can talk to someone like a program like LISC. They can help with that, but HPD also maintains a list of potential owners representatives on our website. These are organizations that have a history of working on affordable housing in New York City. They have a history of working with HPD, and they've all been vetted and pre-approved by HPD. They've got our seal of approval as good partners. I can direct you to that list at the end of the presentation, and they can help you think through what kind of technical assistance you need. And the early pre-development phase is about, 1 to 2 years, and it ends when you've selected your development partner. This is the developer that you'll be working with, who will be guiding the project through construction. And once you and your development partner have finalized the deal, finalized your partnership, you're going to need to get your project approved by the Office of the New York State Attorney General. This is usually if you're selling, mortgaging, leasing your land. The Attorney General approves all of these transactions to make sure that you're entering into a partnership with a developer who's giving you fair and reasonable consideration for the benefits that you're bringing to the project, chiefly the land that you're providing, but any other pieces of the project you might be providing in terms of partnership. We've seen a lot of deals in the past that have gone bad because of unscrupulous developer has taken advantage of a house of worship. So this is a piece of the puzzle that's really meant to keep you safe and make sure you're getting the best deal you can. Once you and your developer are in agreement and you've gotten your approval, we move into the second stage, pre-development. This is typically 2 to 5 years. And at this time, this is where you're really actually crafting the plan, crafting your project. You and your developer will design your project. You'll submit your proposal to HPD. If you need a rezoning or any other kind of land use action, you'll work with HPD to go through that process. That's what our planning teams help you through. You'll obtain any necessary permits for beginning construction. And then the last piece of this phase is engaging your larger community. We really recommend that you engage the community, not just your congregation, but the community beyond your congregation. Bring your project to the local elected officials, the local community board, your immediate neighbors, to talk about what you're bringing, what benefit it'll bring to the community, and to hear the feedback from your neighbors. This project will affect them as well, and it's great to keep that open dialogue throughout the process. If you're curious about what a project proposal that you're submitting to HPD looks like, it's pretty comprehensive. It includes your project vision and scope, what goals you're hoping to achieve with this project, what you're hoping to achieve on the physical site. What does the site look like? What does the building look like? All the necessary legal documentation. And then finally, your financing plan, which includes both HPD financing, the program that you're going to be working with us on. Are you providing senior housing? Are you providing supportive housing? Are you providing housing for the lowest income households? Those are all kind of different programs we offer, as well as any kind of private financing you might get from an organization like LISC or a private bank. The pre-development process ends when you close on your construction financing, when you have your financial deal in place. And approval of your project plan from HPD. And then we enter our final phase, the phase where it all happens, construction and tenant selection, which lasts usually about 2 to 4 years. This is where you actually build the building. And then once the building is almost complete, once your developer has almost completed the building process, HPD will manage the process of helping you select tenants for your building. Through our affordable housing lottery. Tenants who are interested in your project will apply through the NYC Housing Connect portal, and HPD goes through a process where we match prospective tenants with affordable housing opportunities based on their family size and their income, making sure that the folks who are living in the house, it's a lottery process. I mean, there's some matching based on income and family size, but it's applying for the lottery is not a guarantee that you'll get in. We often get far more applicants than there are units available, but we do our best to try to help as many people as possible. And then finally, once the construction is done, right before tenants move in, HPD will inspect the building and make sure that you are moving tenants in to a safe and quality home. And at that point, the project is complete. We all celebrate, and we celebrate the new housing that we've brought to a community. Wrapping up, I know I've thrown a lot of information at you today. So in the last few minutes, I just want to talk about what it means to get started on a project and how you can connect with us. First, this is really a encapsulation of kind of the steps that you should be thinking about in this early pre-development phase as you think about your project. The first step really is to determine your project's suitability, your property's suitability for affordable housing. What kind of housing can you build there? Do you need any changes? How big is your site? Kind of doing some due diligence around the basics of your property's physical conditions. Second is building an internal consensus and a shared vision. This is a long process. So you really want to make sure that your whole congregation is on board, that you are doing this to advance your shared goals, and that you have a internal team who's ready and committed to this work. Third is finding an owner's representative that you trust, who can help you navigate this process and the partnerships that you're going to be engaging in. Fourth, you'll start raising pre-development funding, thinking about all the funding that you'll need to cover the pre-development stage of designing your process, working with an architect, working with a lawyer, figuring it out. And then the fifth and final stage is to secure your development team. That's not just your developer and your owner's representative, that's also your architect, your legal counsel, and anyone else who you might need to support your project. So if this still sounds interesting to you, and we really hope it does, we think faith communities offer a really great opportunity for partnership with HPD and to support their community, both their congregation and their larger community. We'd really like you to connect with us. The QR code on your screen will take you to HPD's Faith-Based Partnerships webpage, where you can learn more. You can fill out our Faith-Based Partnerships intake form, which helps connect us with you. And it gives you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about your property and your vision. You can recap all that we've learned today and even more detail with a really detailed FAQ. It links to that pre-qualified list of owners' representatives I discussed, so you can start thinking about partners, and you'll be able to review a checklist that HPD and the Attorney General created together about best practices about getting a project started. And if you have ideas or questions, you can definitely email us to start a conversation. We can set up time to talk by emailing us at fbopartnerships@hpd.nyc.gov. And I'm sure this presentation will be made available to you so that you can have these resources as well. So thank you, and I think I'll hand it back over to Vicki now for Q&A.
All right, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm gonna just stop the screen sharing. So if folks have any questions or comments, feel free to use the raise hand function. We built in about a half hour for discussion and Q&A, so hoping that if anyone has anything they'd like to ask or say, feel free to just go ahead and raise your hand. Just to get the conversation started, I had a quick question. So anyone who's on this call right now, you walk through the first 5 steps to get started. What would you say is like the absolute first thing someone should do if they are interested in pursuing this route? What is like the next, smaller step?
I think it is that's a really great question. I think really the first thing is making sure that you and your faith community are in agreement about what it is you're trying to accomplish. I think that's talking to the internal leadership of your church or house of worship and really mapping out what you're trying to accomplish with this project, what your goals are, and then bringing them to your congregation to make sure they're on board. The success of your project will definitely hinge on having everyone's buy-in and a shared vision.
Yeah, I would second that. I think that's absolutely the right place to start. And just to kind of take it down the road a little bit, with the faith-based organizations that we're working with through NILOP, one of the questions that's coming up in the sort of the planning process is, what will relocation look like? How long will relocation be? What might be available within the nearby area for that relocation process. So, if the majority of the projects that we're seeing go through this process are demolition of the existing structure and new construction on the site. So that does require relocation. And so, talking to your congregation and understanding that this is a process that may take, the construction process may take 3.5 years, from very start to finish. I think that that's really important to understand and convey to the congregation.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely agree. And seeing as there's no questions from the group, I actually have another follow-up question. Christine, in your presentation, you had mentioned mission-driven organizations versus faith-based organizations. Could you quickly just explain the difference between the two, if there is one?
So LISC was interested in sort of advancing affordable housing production. And so sometimes, and I mentioned that during the presentation too, there's a really great wealth of property ownership amongst faith-based organizations. And so the primary purpose of the New York Land Opportunity Program is to focus on those faith-based organizations that could really utilize and be supported through the redevelopment of the property that they own outright. But there are sometimes other organizations that are mission driven in the community, like a nonprofit community center or different types of sort of community-based organizations that are also landowners, that are also sort of coming to a sort of a crux where they're in need of a new direction for more, sort of financial stability. And they may also want support in going through a redevelopment process to build affordable housing. So that's the difference between the faith-based and the mission-based organization.
Thank you. That's really helpful because I think our goal is to capture as many eligible organizations as possible to make sure we can spread the word. It looks like Pastor Robert Lowe has a question.
Yes, I do. The borough president mentioned early that there were some areas in Queens that were set for rezoning. Can you go over those again that were already set that they're going to rezone? The borough president mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting, but also just to say we have been accepted as one of the NILOP cohorts. So we're in that cohort of the 6. So from Mount Moriah. So we're happy about that as well.
Thank you. Great.
That's really great. We do have some folks from DCP on the line who might be able to briefly describe the rezoning area. It's mostly the downtown area in Jamaica, and then there are some boundaries along major corridors that may or may not catch some of these faith-based organizations. So I just wanted to pass it over to Jonathan if he could just comment on that.
Sure. Hi, Jonathan Keller, the deputy director from the Queen's office. Also, my father was a pastor. So personally love talking to you all about the synergies here and bringing affordable housing to your neighborhoods and congregations. We just launched and kicked off with the council member and borough president and speaker's office a couple weeks ago, the Jamaica neighborhood planning process. It's a very large area. Generally, we are looking at areas bounded from the Van Wyck over to the Hollis Long Island Railroad Station, from west to east, from north to south. The most contiguous area is Hillside Avenue to the north, and to the south, we're looking at down to Linden, but then there's also a number of corridors that, in discussion with the council members and the borough presidents, in part because of locations of faith-based institutions. We're looking down Guy Brewer and Merrick and others. For this study area, we just launched it. We are working to stand up a website in the coming weeks that will detail, the aims and the goals that we're trying to collaborate on with you all and others in the community, and it will show our broad study area. So if you have any questions specifically, happy to try to answer them here. We are working to figure out a time in the coming months to actually have a specific Jamaica focused faith-based meeting, because there are, I don't know, Vicky, the list that we've sort of come up with, I think there's at least 30 institutions in the area. So we will be looking to do something similar here. Obviously, it would be great to do in person to build those relationships. And LISC and HPD, I think one of the common themes running through this all is trust, because your mission is not redevelopment, and so doing something like this has a huge amount of trust that needs to be built. And so we're looking to, through this and also other meetings in the future, help build those bridges between government and nonprofits and you all. So
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, I would say about 30 at least. I'm sure there's more that we could probably add on there, but it's a great question. And we will make sure to share that website in the coming weeks and make sure that there's some cross-pollination on information from this seminar to the rezoning and vice versa. So I saw that Dr. Barbara Talley wrote in the chat. She wrote, "This discussion has already started in our church, and this question has been asked. Are there a certain number of apartment units set aside specifically for church members, or is everyone required to apply through the lottery process?" I think that's an HPD question.
Yeah, I think that's an HPD question, and it's a really good question, and a question we get a lot. Our policy is, and we're guided by fair housing rules, is that all of the projects that we finance, all of the units that we finance, are required to go through the housing lottery process. Obviously, your congregants and church members can apply for the lottery, and if they meet the eligibility requirements, they'll be considered, but applying for the lottery is not a guarantee that they'll get a spot.
Elizabeth, I might enter into the conversation that
Sure.
like typically when there's a faith-based organization that occupies the ground floor, that space has to be condoed out. So it becomes a separate ownership entity. And if there are units that may be associated with the condoed out portion, they may be, and I don't want to speak definitively, but they may be available for the congregation's use. But I think when that kind of evaluation happens, it's definitely not going to be a primary piece of the affordable housing on the site. There's a project that we're working on in NILOP round 2, where I think there's a few units that have been identified that will be condoed out as part of the faith-based portion on the ground floor. But the majority of the units, say 90 affordable housing units are not part of that condo. They're going to be affordable housing, they're going to be financed by HPD, but that condoed portion is not HPD financed.
I think an example of that I understand is around Marcus Garvey Park. Bethel Gospel did something similar, where I could be wrong on this, but I think they condoed out their own congregation, their new space, and some units that the church sort of got to decide how they wanted to use them, whether they would rent them out and use that as an income stream for the church, or renting them directly to folks in the congregation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction. Thanks, Christine and Jonathan, that the housing units that go through the lottery are those that are financed by HPD. If you have another source of financing, and often your project will have multiple sources of financing that is funding some of those other units, you're generally free to fill those however you'd like. So I think that's a conversation for you to have with your development team about how you're structuring your project.
Great. Thank you so much. It's nice to see that there's a lot of nuanced answers here. There's not a one size fits all. Every project is different. So next, we're going to hear from Pastor Abraham Obadair.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, I'm in South Jamaica, Queens, on South Fin Boulevard. I'm just curious to be able to, for us to be considered for any of these projects. Can we use our church name, or it has to be a separate not-for-profit entity that needs to be registered?
Is your church currently a not-for-profit filed 501c3?
Yes.
So this is definitely advice that you want to get from an attorney. But typically what we will see on development projects is if you partner with a developer, you will create a joint venture entity. And that joint venture entity, which is a filed and registered entity, is an ownership entity created between the developer and the faith-based organization. But I would strongly urge, if you have some of those preliminary questions and you want to understand more about the space, definitely reach out to an attorney if you may already work with one, or there might be others that work in this space. The NILOT program, which like I mentioned, just concluded selecting applicants for the third round. We do pair you with an attorney for those sort of preliminary questions, but I recommend that you find an attorney to speak through some of those questions that you have.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. So at this point, I don't see any hands raised. I'm just gonna pause. I'm gonna stop talking, and I'm just gonna let anyone unmute if they have any other additional questions or comments for today's seminar. Okay, well, seeing none, I think we can safely say that this has been an extremely informative seminar. And again, I do apologize, everyone, for having to move this to Zoom. But it's something, this is a very great idea to continue to do, either another session this year or a session next year, to continue to spread the word, because we really do need as much affordable housing as possible, especially here in Queens. So I really want to thank the presenters today from HPD, LISC, and DCP. This has been great. And if anyone has any questions or follow-up questions, rather, feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to funnel that information along to the appropriate agency or entity in general. My email address, I put it in the chat, but it's vgarvey@queensbp.org. And like I mentioned, this is recorded, so we're hoping to put this on our website to share with everyone else. And quickly, I guess I want to ask the presenters, are you able to share your slides or a version of your slides with everybody? Okay, it looks like yes, that's great. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
You.
Yep, you too.